First, we're going to cover what is called tennis elbow and work our way down through that channel of muscles. So tennis elbow is basically caused by a muscle called the brachioradialis muscle. The brachioradialis muscle is the flexor of the elbow. The coracobrachialis muscle up in the armpit can pinch a nerve called the musculocutaneous nerve, which will make this muscle, the brachioradialis muscle, lock up. So you might have to release the coracobrachialis up in the armpit to get this muscle to let go. But the brachioradialis has kind of a trick on its own. So the brachioradialis, it comes from just above the lateral epicondyle on the outside of the forearm, but up on the humerus bone, which is the upper arm bone. From that lateral epicondyle, just above it is where it originates, and it makes its way from there all the way down to the radius where my thumb's pressing. So what I'm doing is I'm stretching the muscle with my thumb and stretching the bone, holding the elbow open and extended. And I'm using my fingers in kind of a phalanx formation to stabilize my middle finger and do slow pressure point yang mode into the pressure point of the brachioradialis and slowly backing my pressure out to try to release it. So there we go. I feel like I got a release on that. When you release the brachioradialis, what it does is it releases the radial nerve. The radial nerve is the nerve that goes to the back of the forearm, but the brachioradialis is clearly on the anterior side of the forearm. But because the brachioradialis intersects with the radial nerve up by the lateral epicondyle, and the radial nerve goes to the back of the forearm and the brachioradialis muscle goes to the front, it can be confusing. So you have to release the brachioradialis muscle in order to release that radial nerve. Once you release the brachioradialis, the pressure on the radial nerve is relieved, and then you'll be able to release the extensor digitorum muscles, which we're going to look at next. So the extensor digitorum is the muscle that comes down the back, the dorsal side of the forearm, and it extends the fingers. Whenever you use a technique that might be painful, remind the person that you're practicing on to breathe. It's really important to breathe because if someone stops breathing, their whole body is going to tense up. Exhaling is just like aspirin, by the way. So Lisa, my model, is great at breathing, so let me let her give you a demonstration of how to do it. Isn't she amazing with breathing? That is how it's done. And if someone doesn't have the ability to do that, they could actually prevent the releaseology techniques through an entire hour from being effective. So breathing is important. This extensor digitorum muscle is potentially very painful because of the radial nerve. But if you do it carefully and you hold steady pressure, you can definitely keep it under that level, under the radar of the level where they need to have it, so it's not too painful, especially when you're working on Lisa. Focus on your technique. Your releaseology techniques, remember, come in two pulses. Focus your pressure in while you're increasing the pressure with the stretch and the focus of the stretch. And then to trigger the release, slowly back your pressure out, making it feel like you're backing your pressure out, even though you don't go anywhere after up to a minute. So trigger your release. So the extensor digitorum, by the way, it releases the fingertips and the back of the wrist. And every once in a while, you feel like it is not releasing all the way and you have to do a little adjustment. And I normally don't do any kind of moving of the skeleton, but there is one wrist alignment that I like to do just because it sometimes really needs to be done, and it always seems to happen right after this extensor digitorum. What I do is I squeeze the wrist with one hand, and I use the thumb of my other hand across the ridge of carpal bones and force not force really, roughly or anything, but just I flex the wrist from the hand forward at that wrist line, and if it doesn't want to go, I need to release the extensor digitorum more, and if it wants to go, then it makes a pop. or a few pops. So let's show you the next muscle, the extensor carpi radialis brevis. The extensor carpi radialis brevis is one of the muscles that extends the carpal bones. It extends the carpal bones almost all the way out at the edge of the wrist, but not as far out as the longus. So there's the extensor carpi radialis brevis, the extensor carpi radialis longus. For both of them, the way to release them is you have to hold the elbow and wrist in this position that I'm showing you, and you flex the wrist forward, and you just go into the tendons with your thumb. So it's the second one to the edge is the radialis brevis. Now let's show you the extensor carpi radialis longus. So see, that one goes all the way out to the very edge of the wrist. So you can find that one also. And the technique is the same for releasing it. So you want to flex the wrist with one hand, supporting the wrist and kind of holding the elbow in that position. You can actually lean the elbow and the wrist over onto the person that you're doing the release on also. But you want to basically flex it and hold the pressure point. Do yang, so slowly increasing your pressure. Once you get a hold of the point, here we go. So slowly increase your pressure. And once you feel like you're really nailing it, then start to back your pressure out and make it feel like you're releasing even though you don't go anywhere for up to like maybe a minute. This one's probably going to be about 20 seconds, so slowly backing out. Okay, we got a release. I felt it release on the outside of the wrist there. Let's show you again. So you can also just get it this way because it's usually just really tight. You don't necessarily need to take all the slack out of it. And that's it for the brachioradialis, the extensors, and the radial tunnel. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.